And a very good morning to you. My name's Joel Hufford. I'm your host for today's Portsmouth Water webinar on the Havant Thicket Reservoir project. I hope you like that film that we started off with. We launched it just over a week ago at the start of our public consultation on the reservoir project, and it really gives you a good idea of how the reservoir would look once it's completed. You'll meet the rest of the panel members that you'll be hearing from today about a range of subjects to do with the reservoir project in terms of its design, access to and from the reservoir, the new pipeline that's needed to take water to and from the reservoir as well, and crucially, the benefits there'll be for the environment locally and further afield across our region, and the benefits for leisure for local communities in particular as well. But just a word of explanation on how the webinar is going to work today. Just because of the numbers of people involved in terms of the public joining, we can't have everyone on camera with sound, so it'll only be myself and the other members of the Portsmouth Water project team that will be on camera and able to speak to you. But you can ask us questions, and we'll get to that in just a second, how you do that. In terms of what we'll hear about today, we'll find out about the need for the reservoir, why it's required in the first place, and the regional picture that it fits into in terms of water supply for the decades ahead. We'll also talk about the benefits there'll be in terms of the environment, both locally and for the wider Hampshire region, and also the benefits that there'll be in terms of a leisure offering for local people in particular. And then there's some key developments we want to bring you up to date on. The latest work we've been doing around the options for access to and from the reservoir. We'll hear from Andy Hills, our colleague, on that. We'll hear about the design and how the reservoir will be built as well, and the safety measures crucially that have been built into that, because we've had a lot of interest in that aspect from people, particularly via our Facebook page. And also as well, we've got an update on the route for the new pipeline that's needed to get water to and from the reservoir. And again, we'll talk to you about the detail of that in due course with Bill Irvine, who's our lead design engineer for the project. The main thing that we want to get out today is for this interaction to be more of a conversation than anything. And we're going to do that by using our question and answer tool at the bottom of your screen. So you can see it highlighted there on the slide that's up at the moment inside the red circle. And if we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see it in closer detail. If you click that at any time, you can ask a question to me and the panel members, and we'll answer them if we can straight away. If not, we'll get back to you after the webinar if it's something that we can't answer straight away right off the bat. The other thing to mention as well is that we're recording the webinar. So if you've got friends and family or colleagues who weren't able to make the webinar session today, we'll put the recording of that up on our website, portsmouthwater.co.uk/Havant-Thicket-Reservoir in due course. So you can watch it back if you want to remind yourself of some of the key parts of the discussion. If you want to share that link with your friends and family, then you can do so. And just a reminder, we've also got other webinar sessions. The next one is on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. Then we've got a bit of a break after the bank holiday weekend, and we've got 2 more on the 3rd and 4th of June. Again, go to our website for all the details on that. The other thing we're going to do today is a quick poll. So let's get that underway. It's just a quick poll for you guys to answer a few questions. First of all, about what you know about the reservoir project already. It's a multiple choice answer, and also how supportive you are of the plans as it stands. So we'll launch that poll, and that should pop up on your screen. Give everybody a few moments just to fill that in. So how much do you already know about the Havant Thicket Reservoir? And you've got a choice of a range of answers. And do you support our plans to develop Havant Thicket Reservoir? We'll just give people a few more seconds to fill those in. We've got a good attendance today, which is good to see on a sunny Tuesday morning. People taking the time to join us and have their say on this important project for the future. So there's still a few answers coming in, and I will share the results with you very shortly. Let's just end it there and share the results. And as you can see, most people know a little about the project, but there's quite a few others that know quite a bit, maybe a lot. Some people know nothing at all, but most people, it's of benefit to you to join the webinar today, and we can bring you up to speed on the project. And most of you are supportive of the reservoir. Some people are not. I think the crucial thing to spell out about the consultation is we want to hear from all sides of the debate. Any queries, any concerns that you've got, please do let us know either via our website. You can talk to us via our Facebook page as well, at Havant Reservoir. If you're on Facebook is the term to search. But crucially, people can get in touch with us via more traditional means, via post and by phoning us as well. And we'll talk to you about that in due course. Right, let's stop sharing the results of the poll, and let's get on with meeting the rest of the panel. So panel members, if you can turn on your cameras and your microphones as well. And just because people may be watching on different devices, so for example, if you're on a mobile phone or a small tablet device, you may only have the option to see whoever's speaking on your screen rather than a full gallery of people, which other people may see. So when I introduce you guys, if you can just wave and say hello, and then you'll pop up on people's screens one way or the other. So let's start with Bob Taylor, who's Chief Executive of Portsmouth Water.
All right. Morning, everyone.
And then we've got Simon Hughes, who's our Environment Stakeholder and Planning Lead for the project.
Hi, everyone.
Joe Farrow works very closely with Simon in preparing the planning application on the project that will go into Havant Borough Council and East Hampshire District Council later this year.
Good morning.
In terms of the leisure offering for the site, we'll hear about the Visitor Centre from Kieran Dyer, who's the lead architect on the Visitor Centre aspect of the scheme.
Good morning.
And we'll also hear from Jamie Metcalf, who's been looking at the overall leisure offering for the reservoir scheme, including things like parking as well and access via foot, cycle and also horse as well.
Good morning, everyone.
In terms of the engineering aspect around the reservoir scheme, we'll talk in great detail to Bill Irvine about the reservoir itself and the pipeline to get water to and from the site too.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
And also a key update will come from Andy Hills, who's been looking at the access route option to the reservoir.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
We've got two people we'll hear from on the environmental benefits that the reservoir scheme will deliver for the local area and the wider Hampshire region. First of all, Trevor Codlin, who's Principal Ecologist at Portsmouth Water.
Good morning, everyone.
And also Liz Brown, who's been doing a lot of detailed work around the environmental impact assessment. That's a key part of the planning application for the scheme.
Hello, good morning.
Right at the start, we'll hear from a gentleman that I can see at the bottom of my screen, Jim Barker, who's Head of Water Resources at Portsmouth Water, about why we need the reservoir in the first place.
Good morning, everyone.
And last but far from least, I've got my two colleagues who are helping me running the webinar session today. First of all, Rebecca Burgess.
Morning, everybody.
And also Josh Newman as well.
Good morning.
And if you ask a question via the Q&A tool, it may be that we answer it by part of the discussion on screen, or it may be that Rebecca or Joss answer it by typing a question right back to you. All the questions that are answered can be seen by everybody on the webinar today, just to remind you. So thank you to the panel members there. Let's just have a quick chat initially with Bob and with Simon first of all, and we'll discuss things with the other panel members in due course as we go around the range of topics today. Bob, first of all, very simple opening question to you. What's your message to people about the project overall and about the consultation as well?
Well, I think the simple message, as you've described already, Joel, is we need, we very much welcome and we need your input in order to develop the proposals further, moving into the planning application and beyond. And we really want to take on board all of the views and the ideas that come from our local community. And we as Portsmouth Water are very much a community-based, a smaller community-based water company, and you know the views of the local community are very important to us in terms of developing these proposals. In fact, we've already taken on board a lot of views in terms of where we got to today with the design, but we want to continue that process. So please contribute. Please tell all of your friends and ask them if they would like to get involved. We've tried to make it as easy as possible by having as many channels of communication, new style, old style, but more than anything, please ask us questions, tell us your thoughts and ideas, tell us your views.
And I guess people will be curious about the fact the consultation is going ahead now when we're in the midst of the restrictions placed upon society by the coronavirus. Can you just talk a bit about why you've decided to go ahead with the consultation? Yeah,
that's a really good question. So the reservoir is due to be completed by April 2029. This is the reservoir is being built to enable Portsmouth Water to export water to our neighbouring company Southern, in order that Southern can take less water from chalk streams in the Test and the Itchen particularly. You'll hear more about this later from others on the webinar this morning. But that's the main reason for us building this reservoir. But also it offers an amazing amenity and community value to our own customers here locally within our region. But in terms of the consultation, in the program, although it may sound like an awful long time, 2029 to get all of this completed, there are major works involved with the design, the planning application, then the construction, and then the filling of the reservoir with water. Actually, that's a 3-year process in itself. So time is short, and we wanted to continue to make progress. We felt we could make progress with the scheme in spite of the coronavirus restrictions by moving on to an online offering. We had a discussion with the 2 planning authorities involved, and they were very supportive. And in fact, we believe that we should be able to reach out to more people than we otherwise would have spoken to through the more kind of conventional sort of village hall type of public consultation. So we hope we will be able to seek more views and more input in order for us to optimize the whole thing moving forward.
Okay, thank you to Bob. Simon, briefly a question to you. We've had a question already via the Q&A button at the bottom of people's screens from Peter Lewis. And he talks about where is the project at in terms of getting planning permission. And I think looking at the comments on Facebook, it's probably worth spelling that out for people, where we are in the planning process and why this consultation is happening and what it will inform.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks, Peter. Good question. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. So we've been, as some of you would know, we've been talking to communities and stakeholders about this project since the early 2000s. And one of the resounding messages that I'm hearing is, will you please just get on with it? And that's really what this represents. Where we are in the planning process is that we've developed our outline plans, and you can see those. You'll see a glimpse of them today. You can see a little bit more detail on the website and in some of the material that's available. And we want to hear more from you, because we've had these conversations with the stakeholder forum and with customers and with communities around the reservoir for the last 10 to 15 years, and they have shaped what you're seeing today. This is a further opportunity to shape those just before we submit our planning application to the local planning authority in early September this year. So there's another this opportunity, and then there's obviously an opportunity once we've submitted. But we really want to hear, as Bob said, from you, your thoughts on what you're seeing, so that we can then incorporate those in our plans when we submit them in September.
Grand. Thank you to Simon and Bob for now. Those guys will be back to answer your questions throughout. And also, as well, I've already had questions in from Mark and Lewis about the access routes options for the reservoir, and also as well the leisure offering. We'll get to those in due course, but to take a phrase out of Simon's book, let's get on with it and let's get into the meat and drink of it. Let's hear from Jim Barker about why we need the reservoir in the first place.
So I'm Jim Barker, I'm the Head of Water Resources for Portsmouth Water, and it's my job to make sure that there's enough water available to be treated to allow water to come out of everyone's taps for the next 100 years. Building a reservoir in Havant is one of the key parts of a regional water resources plan to make sure that water is available for the whole of the southeast going forward. Water companies are being asked to take less water from some sources we have available to us today, particularly from rivers, and that's in order to keep the rivers safe and healthy to protect wildlife. Plus, we need to find more water to combat the effects of climate change. We're seeing our weather patterns change, and of course we're seeing a growing population in the southeast. So all of that adds up to the water resources in the southeast being under a bit of pressure, and this reservoir will supply extra water into the system to relieve some of that pressure. In particular, Southern Water, our neighbours in Hampshire, are being asked to take less water from 2 world-renowned chalk streams, the rivers Test and Itchen. We, in Portsmouth Water here, we get most of our water from the ground, from the chalk beneath our feet, and we have a series of underground springs that provide plentiful clean water to us. But as part of the southeast, we want to play our role. So in winter, much of our spring water actually flows out to sea. We don't capture it, and we don't treat it for drinking water because people are using less water in the winter. So what we're proposing with this reservoir is actually to capture the water that is lost to the sea from our springs, to put it in the reservoir over the winters so it's available should we have a long, hot, dry summer and water resources become scarce. It's really also important to say that this isn't just about finding more water. Us as water companies, and particularly as Portsmouth Water, we're doing our bit to be more effective and efficient with the water we have. So our leakage levels, for instance, are currently at their lowest level we've ever had. It's really important that we don't waste water. We're also looking to talk to customers about using water wisely. So in this situation of more people, climate change, less water available, we all need to think, are we using water wisely? And to take simple steps that could possibly help us all use a little bit less. We've talked about the reservoir before. Plans for the reservoir, in fact, were first drawn up in 1964, but it was again in 2008 that we drew up the most recent plans, and at that point we shared those plans with our customers, with you guys, during a public consultation. At that point, the water situation wasn't quite as stressful as it is today, so it didn't go forward at that point. But we're bringing it forward now because the situation is more stressed than it was in 2008, and also the regional understanding of the water situation and our ability to move water around the region has improved, which makes the reservoir a lot more important to more people. So right now there's a shortfall of water across the southeast as a whole, and plans for the reservoir have been included in Portsmouth Water and Southern Water's long-term water resource plans as a way of looking to close some of that shortfall.
So we heard from Jim Barker there in that film about why we need the reservoir in the first place. Let's talk to Jim now. And Jim, we've had a question in already. No name against this one, but somebody has been busy pressing that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and typing in. And this person says, why has the thicket been chosen? Aren't there other areas that could have been used, especially if it's more to give water to Southern Water than Portsmouth Water residents?
That's a good question. So the Havant Thicket site has three major advantages. One, it's land we own, so that's an obvious one. Two, actually, it underneath the Havant Thicket Reservoir site, and I'm sure the guys will talk about this, Bill will talk about this in a bit more detail in a bit, but actually there's a lot of clay under there. The geology is suited to abstracting the clay already on site, reworking it and forming it into a bowl. So actually, geologically, it's a really good location to try and build a reservoir. And finally, actually, it's water's really heavy and expensive to move. So actually, the springs we're looking to fill the reservoir up from are in Havant or in Bedhampton, and having the reservoir close to those springs is a really effective and efficient kind of situation to be in. So then the water from the reservoir we'll treat at Farlington, which is also local. So we're not moving water a long way. That's not actually the water we'll send to Southern Water. So what we'll do then is shuffle all our resources west. So our sites that are currently in the Meon Valley, and actually we abstract from the Itchen as well, that water will be the water that we send to Southern, and the Havant Thicket Reservoir water will just kind of fill the gap behind that. So everything moves kind of slightly westwards. So it's a really efficient place to put the reservoir.
Okay, Jim, thanks for the answer to that question. Remember, you can keep your questions coming in via the Q&A tool at the bottom. And don't forget, all the videos you see today, the recording of this webinar will be available on our website. If you just Google Havant Thicket Reservoir, it will pop up, and all the material you'll see today is there if you want to share it with family and friends. And as Bob said, and Simon too, do let us know your views one way or the other. You can fill out our feedback survey either online, or we can send you a printed copy to fill in, or you can ask us questions via the website as well. And in particular with things like the access route options and the pipeline route, you can go in and you can leave a comment with a virtual map pin on a map and tell us your comments about particular aspects of those issues, or leave us a question as well. So we talked about the reservoir itself, how it's going to be built, why the location where it's going to go is ideal for a reservoir. Let's hear more about that from Bill Irvine, lead design engineer for the project.
My name's Bill Irvine. I'm lead design engineer on the Havant Thicket project. My role on the project is to coordinate all of the design elements across the project, including the reservoir itself, the pipeline, the pumping station, and downstream treatment works and connections into the network, providing water across the Southern Waters region. The proposed site for the reservoir has been owned by Portsmouth Water since 1965 and covers 160 hectares. It sits next to Rowlands Castle and Lee Park and is bordered to the north by Forestry England woodland at Havant Thicket, and Staunton Country Park lies to the south, which is owned by Hampshire County Council. The area is currently grassland and open space with areas of trees. The site has been chosen as perfect place for a reservoir because it sits in a valley on clay soils, which provides a natural seal for water. This means we'll be able to dig and shape the reservoir, predominantly using the existing material on the site. The reservoir would fill the majority of the site and will be up to 18 metres deep in places, and it will be about 1 mile long from east to west and half a mile wide from north to south. The water will be contained by a sloping embankment, which will run along 3 sides of the reservoir and up to 20 metres high in places, with a new wetland habitat area created along its northern edge. The embankment will be mainly constructed from clay, soils excavated on site, but we will need to bring some material to site for drainage and for the internal lining. The embankment will have a grass covering on the outer slope and a rocky surface lining the embankment at the water's edge, protecting the structure from waves. We've looked at the position and design of the embankment and made a number of alterations to avoid the hedges near the western boundary of the site, and slight realignments to reduce the number of trees that will need to be taken out at Roundwood and the Avenue, both of which are ancient woodland. This includes increasing the space between the western boundary and the embankment, making the southwestern edge slightly straighter and shortening the eastern bank. We've also looked at making slopes slightly steeper in places to reduce the land required to build the embankment and minimise tree loss. We will need to build a control house on the southwestern section of the embankment and a new access road as well, and the options for these routes will be discussed separately by my colleague Andy Hills. When full, the reservoir will be able to hold about 8.7 billion litres of water. That's enough to supply 160,000 people during an average year. It will take 9 years to plan, build and fill the reservoir. Everything is scheduled to be complete and the reservoir full of water and open to the public by 2029. We're aiming to have achieved planning permission to enable us to start on site with enabling works through to 2023, creating the access road, preparing the site and diverting footpaths. From 2023, we can then commence construction of the embankment and reservoir itself, digging out the clay and building the reservoir. We'll also be laying the pipeline to transfer water from the pumping station at Bedhampton up to the reservoir itself. From 2027, we can start to construct the amenity provisions on site, including new pathways, a visitor centre and facilities. All works should be finished by 2029.
So that's the reservoir itself, and in particular the engineering design and the construction that's involved. Bill Irvine, who you heard from, their lead design engineer for the reservoir project, has joined us again. We had a question from Peter Lewis again, Bill, and you touched on it in the latter part of your video there. Peter asked, why does it take so long to complete the reservoir in terms of the phasing of the building and taking 10 years to get from beginning to end?
Yeah, that's a great question, Peter. So I think, as Bob sort of touched on in his introductory speech, it's a big project. We've got to be quite careful that we get all the site cleared appropriately. So there's some sensitive species on site. And there's the wooded areas as well as we've seen in the video. So we need to take care that we're doing that appropriately under sort of agreement and oversight from the Environment Agency, Natural England as well. So once the site's cleared, that's going to take us sort of 2 or 3 years to do that. We can start construction of the embankment itself. And again, we have to take care that that's done appropriately. The embankment structure will be overseen by what's called a panel engineer under the Reservoirs Act 1975. So it's quite closely sort of governed in terms of how that's managed and the oversight that's provided. So again, that's we've allowed sort of 3-year program to get the embankment constructed, and all the sort of pipeline, the other sort of operational facilities, the control house that are going on site as well. And then finally, as Bob says, we've got to fill the reservoir, so we need to pump the waters up from the springs down at Bedhampton and Havant, and with 8,700 megalitres to fill that reservoir up. That's going to take a few seasons to do that as well.
Yeah, 8.7 billion litres in old money, so to speak.
That's it. Yeah.
Indeed. Fantastic. Thanks to Bill for the time being. We've got a few questions stacking up, particularly around the leisure side of things on the reservoir site, from Mark, from Lewis, from Linda and Peter, Nathan as well. We'll get to those in due course, but we have had a question in about the environmental impact and the environmental benefits that the reservoir will deliver. Some concern around the loss of woodland. Let's hear more about that now with Trevor Codlin, our principal ecologist.
And my name is Trevor Codlin, leading on biodiversity side of the project. We have always maintained that this is an environmentally led project, and although the habitats on site will change quite dramatically, we are committed to delivering something really special to replace what is already there. We have been surveying the site since 2005, so we have a good understanding of the ecology of the site. We've recorded 13 species of bat, we've got reptiles on the site, breeding birds, and also dormice. And our mitigation and compensation strategy involves doing some quite significant enhancements to the Forestry England site to the north, which is Havant Thicket, and also doing some enhancements to the south in areas of land that we own. One of the key things that we want to deliver, and this is a really exciting bit of the project for me, is the delivery of a new wetland. The plan is to have an area of wetland along the northern edge of the reservoir. So this will be approximately 1 kilometre long. What we're going to have is a retaining bund which will separate the sort of main water body from this wetland, and then we're going to create 4 different wetland compartments which will provide the different range of habitats for different species. There are 4 areas of woodland on the site. We've looked at various options as to how we might save those areas of woodland, because through the consultation process with our partners, which include Forestry England, Natural England, Environment Agency and the Hampshire Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, we talked about whether or not it'd be possible to provide 3 or 2 smaller reservoirs rather than 1 large water body and try and save the avenue. But unfortunately there are 2 reasons why that can't happen. One is the best clay is located underneath the avenue, and the second is that if you did that, you then end up in a situation where you don't have enough water to address the needs for the future, for water supply for the future. The site is going to change, as we said, so what we're looking at doing is doing some extensive work to improve the quality of the woodlands in Havant Thicket to the north, and then we've also set up a grant scheme, and that capital grant scheme will provide some funding for conservation projects. So we're looking at identifying suitable sites where we would fund the planting of trees in those areas.
So Trevor Codlin there talking about the environmental aspect of the reservoir project. Just a reminder, all the feedback that we get from you, whether you go onto our website and complete our online feedback survey, whether you send us a question in via post at Portsmouth Water's headquarters in Havant, whether you get in touch with us via phone as well and leave a comment or question as well on 02392 449084. All that gets logged, all that gets looked at by the project team, and it gets taken into account as they prepare that planning application that will go into Havant Borough Council and East Hampshire District Council later on this year. You'll then get a chance to have your say further during the consultation around the planning application. So do let us know what you think. Tell your friends and your family, your colleagues, and encourage them to do the same as well. So we heard from Trevor about the first part of the work they've been doing around the environment on the reservoir project. There's also a very detailed piece of work called an environmental impact assessment that our colleague Liz Brown has been working on, and she tells us more about it now.
Hello, I'm Liz Brown. I'm the Havant Thicket Reservoir Project's Environmental Assessment and Design Lead. Havant Thicket Reservoir is going to create a valuable new wetland, woodland, parkland habitats, a visitor centre with parking facilities and a network of trails and paths. We have to take into consideration the impacts of any construction on the surrounding environment. So what we've been doing is we've been carrying out an environmental impact assessment for the scheme. This assessment identifies the environmental effects of the project and develops mitigation to avoid, reduce or offset these environmental effects. The assessment approach, our methodologies, have all been discussed and agreed with the local authority, East Hampshire District Council and Havant Borough Council. The environmental assessment includes inputs from a number of environmental topics. These include air quality, biodiversity, historic environment, landscape and changes in view, noise and vibration, population and health, transport and water, and that's in relation to water quality, water resources and flood risk. We've undertaken a number of surveys and studies. Most importantly, Portsmouth Water anticipated that a lot of survey work in terms of biodiversity would need to be done. But this means that surveys have been undertaken recently and reported on in terms of European protected species, but other habitats as well. In addition, we've done a ground investigation, which is informing the assessments about ground conditions and the amount of material that might be generated on site, which can be used during construction. And we've also been doing traffic surveys to ascertain traffic numbers in the local areas to inform our assessment. The advantage of having this baseline information means that we have up-to-date current information, and then we can then consider the changes that might happen as a result of the project. As our design develops further, we will be developing a detailed environmental plan for construction. Now, this is for both the pipeline and the main reservoir itself. We prepare an outline of this as part of the planning application. This will indicate how we will keep any impacts, such as noise from traffic or construction activities, to a minimum as we are working. This plan will be agreed in advance with the relevant local authorities, and the measures it includes will be applied throughout the construction. For example, a traffic management plan will help to reduce disruptions, such as restricting construction traffic to certain routes and times of the day.
So plenty of information there about how the reservoir project work on that is about protecting and improving the environment as far as possible. Let's speak to Trevor, Principal Ecologist at Portsmouth Water, and Liz Brown, who you heard from there, who's leading the work on the environmental impact assessment for the reservoir scheme. Very detailed piece of work. If you want more information on that, go to the website portsmouthwater.co.uk/Havant-Thicket-Reservoir, and there's a summary of the key information to date. Trevor, we had a few questions in already. One from Peter Lewis, who asked about the wetland that will be on the northern side of the reservoir. And he says, what percentage of the overall reservoir will actually be made up by the wetland?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Very good question. Yes, the wetland side of things is probably the most exciting thing for me. And you're looking at a wetland covering around about 10 hectares. So just along the northern edge of the site. So it's going to be about 1 kilometre in length, and then about about 100 metres in width. And then we're breaking it down into essentially 5 compartments, because there'll be 4 areas which are contained compartments, which will be a mixture of sort of reed bed, wet woodland, and then sort of open sort of scrape type habitats, and then an area in the extreme east of the site where we're looking to create some wet grassland, and that won't be contained, so that will just naturally flood with the sort of rise and fall of the water level on the main reservoir.
Okay, and Peter also asked about hides for bird watching for the public. Is that part of the plan as well?
Yeah, we're obviously that's part of the consultation process. So we've had we've got a wetland stakeholder group that have been feeding in, which include Hampshire Ornithological Society, Hampshire Wildlife Trust. So we've taken a lot of advice from these people. We have to obviously be aware of sort of very mindful of security issues and things like that. But the proposals are at the moment to have educational hide and then some screens and viewing areas to sort of view over the more sensitive areas of the wetland.
Okay, and Liz, I've had a question that's come in from another Liz McCallum. She's concerned about the percentage of ancient woodlands that would be affected. So we saw the map in Trevor's film about the ancient woodlands. Do you want to talk a bit about the work we've been doing around that to deal with that issue?
Definitely, thank you, Liz. And that is a good question, and thank you for raising it. Currently, we're still developing our design and our assessment, so I'm actually quite loath to give you an exact percentage, because it's a bit of a moving feast. But in terms of basically our strategy for the sites in terms of mitigation is to avoid, mitigate, and compensate. So what we will be doing is we'll be looking to compensate as much as possible for the loss of any ancient woodland as part of the design development.
Yeah, and Trevor, you and I spent a great morning out with some local school pupils on the Thicket site, finishing off planting more than 3,000 trees that have already gone in as part of that plan that Liz was talking about.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate because through this whole process, and as everybody knows, this has been going on a very long time, many years, and so we've been engaging with Natural England and various other stakeholders, Wildlife Trust throughout, and obviously being aware that we were losing woodland, and also trying to sort of compensate for the loss of that woodland for the species that are on site already. Natural England gave us permission to start doing some planting. So we've got local schools involved, and so the first phase of the planting took place the winter before last, and that's in the east on the Gypsies Plain side. So those trees are doing very well, and we planted some 3-metre standards and also some smaller trees. And then this winter we've now planted in the southwest corner of the site, and so as you say, around about sort of 3,000 trees in total. But that's not all we're looking at doing. You know, we understand the importance of the ancient woodlands on this site, and we're taking that sort of responsibility very seriously. We know it has to be lost because we need to remove the woodlands to get to the clay, and so we're actually talking to partners at the moment about doing some significant woodland planting off-site, and you know, it's too early to sort of talk about those sort of things because we're still working up the detail. But you know, we should be sort of creating a lot more woodland than what's being lost on site.
Okay, thanks to Trevor and to Liz on the environmental side of the reservoir project. We've got a lot of questions coming in via the Q&A button at the bottom from people about the leisure aspect of the scheme. We'll get to those in just a second. First of all, let's hear about that in more detail from our colleague, Jamie Metcalf.
I'm Jamie Metcalf and I'm the Havant Thicket landscape architect. I am tasked with designing the external spaces at Havant Thicket in order to create somewhere special for everyone to use. For the local people, Havant Thicket Reservoir will create an exciting new leisure facility and wildlife conservation area for local communities on their doorstep. We want to provide a place for people of all ages to stay healthy, learn more about water and nature, and to get together as a community. We also want to support local wildlife to thrive. So we've worked closely with the local community to understand people's views and develop proposals that reflect these. We're also working closely with our neighbours at Staunton Country Park and Forestry England's Havant Thicket site to make sure our plans work together and support each other. This is our overall plan, which is shaping our proposals. It includes a new wetland habitat on the reservoir's northern edge that's discussed in detail in our video on the reservoir and the environment. Our plan also includes a visitor centre with cafe, shop, community and education spaces, parking facilities, play and picnic areas, and a network of trails for walkers, cyclists and horse riders. So on the site, the visitor centre will be set in the landscaped area, with parking, play areas and picnic sites connecting visitors with the wetland and the surrounding woodland. A wetland boardwalk will run from outside the visitor centre to the nearby bird hide. This will be amongst reeds next to the water, which will encourage visitors to get closer to wildlife on the site and learn more about it. A network of nature trails will lead from the centre for walkers, joggers, cyclists and horse riders. The plan is to replace the existing bridleway with a 5-kilometre circuit around the site with access points for people living nearby. A shorter 1-kilometre trail through the woodland will provide an alternative for visitors who want to stay closer to the cafe and car park. Benches, bins, viewing areas and information boards will also be located all around the reservoir. We've been working closely with local councils, environmental groups and other companies who manage similar sites to explore ways to create a great place for visitors, as well as a peaceful home for the wildlife. We've also been talking to local communities, walking groups and cycling and horse riding representatives to understand all your needs. We plan to provide parking for just under 200 cars in the northwest corner next to the visitor centre. There will also be an extra 75 spaces in an overflow car park with occasional use. We want the car park to have a natural feel with native trees and shrubs and paths leading to the woodland. This will also make it easier for wildlife to travel through the car park area. The car parking will also include spaces for staff, disabled visitors and coaches, as well as cycle racks, and near the time we'll look at how many electric charging points we'll need. The overall parking space numbers are based on the amount of people we expect to drive to the site. They were worked out in a review carried out last year by a company which specialises in public attractions. Based on the medium level of activities we plan to offer. If we offered more activities, we would need to plan for more visitors to the site. There will be charges for car parking, and these will be set in consultation with Hampshire County Council to make sure they align with charges at other nearby sites such as Staunton Country Park and the Forestry England's Havant Thicket Woodland, so that car parks can support each other. We'll be encouraging as many visitors as possible to leave their cars at home and walk and cycle to the reservoir, as well as make use of local transport like buses and trains. We want to work with local authorities and travel companies to integrate the reservoir into the local public transport network.
Jamie Metcalf there with an update on the potential leisure offering around the reservoir site. Plenty of questions on that coming in. We'll get to those in a very short period of time after we've heard about the visitor centre in just a moment. There's also a couple of additional questions that have come in on environmental issues from Liz and from Anne. Don't worry, we'll get to those before the webinar finishes. We'll have a bit of a wrap-up session with questions we haven't got to towards the end. So if you can hang on for that, we'll get to your questions and answer them there. Also, the recordings of the webinars will be made available on our website as well. That's portsmouthwater.co.uk/Havant-Thicket-Reservoir. So let's hear about the visitor centre that you caught a glimpse of in Jamie's film there. Here's further detail on that from Kieran Dyer.
I'm Kieran Dyer. I'm the architectural lead for the Havant Thicket Reservoir project, and my main remit is to look after the buildings that are part of the reservoir development, mainly the visitor centre and the public realm. The visitor centre is such an exciting part of the overall scheme. Really, it's going to be the public face, the touch points that the public are going to come and see about the reservoir and the development. It has to blend into the natural landscape of the reservoir and the wetlands. We're looking to maintain that rural character, particularly for the use of sort of natural materials to connect people with water. So we're looking at a waterfront location for the visitor centre to really provide that experience and connection for visitors. So the visitor centre is going to have several facilities, a key one being the reception area, where visitors will be able to get information about the water, wildlife and activities that's happening around the whole reservoir. There will also be a large open plan cafe which will have panoramic windows which will give you views across to the wetlands and the different habitats. There's going to be an external terrace as well, which will be just off the cafe. That will have some overflow for another 50 people. There's also going to be a small little shop which will sell local products and artwork. There's also going to be an education and community space. You know, it's going to be a nice flexible area with a separate outdoor space, cloakroom and toilets as well. And really we need to provide sufficient space for staff and volunteers, so there's going to be an office and break room for them as well. The visitor centre has to be designed for a broad range of people. We're looking at accessible users, dog walkers, cyclists, runners, family groups and community groups. So really the visitor centre has to suit all their needs, and that's our challenge. We'll work up the plans to the outline planning permission. Following that, we will work with local stakeholders and community groups to develop the designs further into something more detailed.
Some more detail there on the visitor centre offering for the reservoir site. And if you go to our website and look at the page that's about the leisure side of things, there's a really neat feature. You can post your ideas, a bit like a virtual post-it note. Write down your ideas for leisure, put them on that digital board, and we'll take them on board. We're joined by Jamie and Kieran. If Simon can perhaps join us as well, because there's a fair few questions around leisure stacking up. So guys, if I fire them at you, and if you can perhaps answer them as punchy as you can, because we've got quite a few to get through. Had one in from Mark right at the start that we've held on to. He says, the original plans include a slipway for small boat launching. Is this feature part of the current construction plan? And then a related question from Peter again, who's asking about sailing on the site. So Simon, did you want to cover that one off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, thanks guys. And we had a lot of questions about boating on the site, and now at the moment the whole purpose of the visitor experience is to try and recreate what's there already in terms of a place for tranquility, a place for quiet reflection and quiet enjoyment of the countryside. We're also going to have an operational site with water levels moving with no warning often, and we're going to have a lot of water-based ecology on site, which is very, very sensitive to disturbance. So at the moment, the proposal is not to have any kind of organised boating on the site. There will be a little slipway created because there'll need to be operational access for boats to get to bits of the kit that need to be repaired. But right at this stage, we're not proposing to have any boating on site for public. We'll keep it under review, but that's the proposal at the moment.
Okay, and then Linda and Peter Voss, Jamie, have been in touch. They asked about charges for car parking, which we covered off in the video by saying it will be coordinated with the other sites locally to make sure that it's all on a level playing field. They've asked a second question though, which is, will the current car parking by the Forest of Beer access remain? Is that going to stay in place?
Yes, thank you, Linda and Peter. Yes, this car parking is going to remain as part of Forestry England car parking.
Grand. Simon, I think another one for you perhaps from Nathan. How do you intend to address security issues on site at night? or do you intend to ensure the whole site is unaccessible when it's not open? What are the opening hours going to be for the visitor centre? So that whole issue of there's antisocial behaviour in the area at the moment. What are we going to do around making sure that doesn't become part of the site?
Yeah, so thanks. That's really good point. We've given this a lot of thought, and we've been working with colleagues in Hampshire County Council who run a lot of different sites of this type around the county and do it very successfully, very safely, and they are very good at delivering great service to people. So yeah, we'll manage access to the site very carefully, and there'll be a number of stages or elements to that. The first is all the public rights of way, all the public open spaces will always be open, carefully monitored, but always open. So we're not proposing to change that aspect of it. The public buildings will be staffed, and they'll be accessible during the sort of hours that you'd expect to be able to go to, for example, Staunton Country Park or Queen Elizabeth Country Park. So longer hours in the summers and at the holidays, and maybe slightly shorter hours during the winter when there's a bit less demand for it. There will always be staff, there'll always be someone there in the building to help manage the visitor experience. Car parks and roads will be accessible to vehicles when the site is staffed, and they'll be closed when they're not. So there won't be opportunities for people to drive their car up the road after hours because it'll be barriered. The operational areas will be closed to the public access at all times, except for there will be, I'm sure, some guided tours, or if people are really interested, they can come and have a look under supervision. And then finally, during construction, the intention is to the very, very most important thing is that we keep people safe. Within that, it's really important that people continue to use as much of the site as humanly possible, and we'll work with the contractor to find a way to allow as much public access to the site and ability to watch what's going on as we possibly can during the construction phase.
Okay, that's great. Jamie, got a question for you that's come in. It's about the video we had right at the start of this webinar, and we'll play it again for people that perhaps missed it when they were still joining. It's a very impressive video, shows the sort of CGI flyover film of the completed reservoir site, but some eagle-eyed people spotted steps, and they say, what about accessibility? Will there be ramp access, accessibility for all on the reservoir site?
Yeah, so there are steps proposed along that the avenue connecting into Staunton Country Park. So what we've tried to do is have slopes that are 1 in 5 as a maximum. So this is trying to match the local landscape essentially. So we're trying to blend in our site within the landscape. Access will be provided along the top all the way around by the crest, and this will all be those for accessible needs, and then also along the bridleway along the south, the operational maintenance track.
Okay, great. Question from Jennifer again for you, Jamie. She's asked specifically towards you. She talks about the car park that's off Swanmore Road. From her recollection, back in 2012, when it was talked about, or perhaps in 2008, the consultation back then, there wasn't any mention of a car park in that location. Is that something new, or has the car park always been that way?
So I think there used to be a small car park proposed on the corner of Swanmore Road. This has been since reevaluated, and we've been able to pull in all the car parking within the site itself. So we're having the car park in that northwest corner.
Okay, great. And one final question to you, Jamie. Any questions we don't get to, don't worry, we'll either wrap them up at the end of this webinar in a sort of mop-up Q&A, or we'll get back to you after the fact. There's one gentleman who's written in, I think it's Nathan again, who's asking about shared access on the paths there. So he says the bridleway appears to be shared with others and not separate. Should it not be separate, as horses can sometimes be spooked for no reason at all, and people sometimes feel nervous around horses as well? So what's the deal with cyclists, horse riders, walkers sharing paths possibly?
So we've consulted with a lot of our parties, horse riders, cyclists and pedestrians, and we are proposing a shared surface along the bottom of the embankment. So this will be for all users, where the top of the embankment will be there for cyclists and pedestrians. So there is segregation in some places, but along the bridleway itself, it will be for multi-user.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, gents, for the time being. We'll get through all of those questions either in today's webinar or we'll get back to you after the fact, but don't worry, those questions won't go unanswered. We've got two key issues to cover off in the remainder of this webinar, though. The routes for the pipeline that will take water to and from the reservoir in due course, but first of all, how people will get to and from the reservoir by vehicle as well. And let's hear from my colleague, Andy Hills, on that.
Hello, my name's Andy Hills. I'm the senior engineer on the reservoir project who's been leading work on the options for the access route to and from the site. We need to create a public road for vehicles to get in and out of the reservoir site. That's both whilst the reservoir is being built and when it opens to the public. Options for the access road were last looked at back in 2006 to 2008. Since then, the local area has changed, so we think it's important to look at all the options again. There's more development to the southwest of the site, and there's planning permission for a residential and mixed-use development just to the north of the site. These and other plans for development mean there are new challenges and opportunities to consider. We've carried out another review of all the options and will continue to review and develop new ones. Each option was assessed in terms of impact on the environment, engineering and construction, and how it fits into the overall aims of the project. Our review has shown that there are now two potential access points to the reservoir from the north and from the south. A number of routes from the north were considered during the public consultation in 2008. The preferred one came from the A3M Junction 2 via the B2149. At this time, this was supported by most people because it was close to A3M and avoided residential areas in Warren Park and Rowlands Castle. From the B2149, 200 metres new access track would be needed through woodland, and then the road would continue on an existing Forestry England track in Havant Thicket to reach the reservoir. There were and still are concerns about the impact of more traffic on the B2149. As we've studied the reservoir in more detail over the past few months, we've been able to make changes to the design of the embankment, and this has created more space on the southwest side of the site. This has enabled a southern option to be developed. We can now build the embankment, a southern access route, and a separate path for walkers, cyclists, and others. This means we can create an access point from the south, either instead of or in addition to a northern one. This access point would come off Swanmore Road and follow a new road on the site along the west side of the reservoir and up to the car park and visitor centre. We're considering what routes may be available for construction, vehicles and visitors to reach this access point, whilst creating as little impact on the local roads as possible. We're continuing to develop and assess these two access options and are having ongoing conversation with landowners on the routes and the Highway Authority to see what is possible. We think this is an important time to hear your views and those of local councillors, environmental groups and other interested organisations. So please let us know what you think. We could even consider developing two access points, one from the north and the south.
You heard from Andy there about the access route options. We'll speak to Andy now and Joe Farrer, who's overseeing the preparation of the planning application, all the detail that goes into that will go into Havant Borough Council and East Hampshire District Council in a few months' time. Joe, I've got a question in perhaps for you to answer first, and Andy can come in on this as well. It's from Lewis. He says the B2149 Durrance Road, Manor Lodge Road is already busy and dangerous. With the addition of the visitor centre, this is expected to get even worse. Has Portsmouth Water done an assessment of the impact the additional traffic and noise will bring to nearby residents? What are the planned measures to minimise this impact?
I think that's probably one for Andy, actually.
Yeah, no, I was just going to suggest that, but I didn't want to step in first. Okay, you're right. The junction in question is busy, as are quite a few other junctions in the neighbourhood. We've done a traffic assessment, which will look at the existing traffic levels, and we will be modelling that to see what the impact will be with respect to the construction traffic and also the proposed visitor traffic. In terms of mitigation, we will be looking to restrict construction traffic from the motorway junctions, the A3M junctions, travelling to and being prescriptive in making it avoid residential areas such as Rowlands Castle.
Okay,
we're also looking at developing both the north and south routes to further dilute any impact of traffic at the same time.
Okay, Andy, I'm sorry for interrupting there. Peter's been back in touch with a kind of related question. He talks about a traffic impact assessment as well. And again, he highlights that that busy double roundabout at the junction of Manor Lodge and Durrance Road. Is that on your radar in terms of looking at and seeing what the traffic levels are now and what might happen in the future?
Yes, you're quite right. It's a busy junction. Yes, it is on the radar, and it forms part of the traffic count and turning count assessment at that, and that will be factored in with this transport assessment for that and other junctions that may be impacted by the works and the operation of the site.
Okay, and those traffic assessments are ongoing, and the work to develop the preferred access route option is ongoing. Joe, can you just talk about when people will see the detail of that? Is that when the planning application goes in a few weeks' time, once we've looked at all the consultation feedback, looked at further conversations with highways authorities and the like to see what we think is best?
Yes, the planning application goes in at the end of the summer, beginning of September, and between now and then we'll be looking in a lot more detail about which access works best in terms of the impact on the environment. Obviously, the northern access will be going through ancient woodland. It goes along an existing track, but we still need to be very cautious about the potential impact on that area. And the southern access comes off a residential area, so we need to be very cautious about the potential impact on the local residents. But by potentially having both accesses, we could really dilute that traffic impact and the impact on the ancient woodlands. So that's something we're looking at very carefully over the next few months with Hampshire County Council, the local highway authority, and we will be, within our planning application, we will have decided on the preferred option, along with any feedback from this consultation process as well, and that will be within our plans that are submitted in September.
Okay, and we started off with a question from Lewis about the northern access option. There's a question in from Jennifer about the southern one. Andy, perhaps one for you. Jennifer says the access road is still on the bend of Swanmore Road. Could it be moved so it's on a straighter part of that particular road for safety reasons?
The difficulty is if you go too far south down Swanmore Road, you have the school, so if you get in close proximity to the school, so it'll introduce another junction in the vicinity of the school. If I place it on the corner, we will have good visibility both down towards Coleshop Road direction and also down south down Swanmore Road. It would also sort of impact as well where we have the road coming up, because if you remember from the plan or the image of the reservoir dam, it would require more space on the other side of the hedge to fit that road in. So those are the reasons why we've elected to go for that point as we have done.
Okay, and if you want more detail on the pros and cons of both those access route options, you can go to the website portsmouthwater.co.uk/Havant-Thicket-Reservoir, and there's a summary of the pluses and minuses against each of the options you can have a look at, and further details to come when the planning application goes in. Many thanks to Andy and Joe for now. Don't worry if your question hasn't been answered yet, that you sent in via the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. We will get all the questions covered off today. Even if we run on a bit longer, we'll get all the questions answered so that you get a response and see what we've got to say about that. So on to the final video of the morning, and let's talk about how we're going to get water to and from the reservoir via a new pipeline. Bill Irvine's back to talk about that.
Hello, my name's Bill Irvine. I'm lead design engineer on the Havant Thicket project. My role on the project is to coordinate all of the design elements across the project, including the reservoir itself, the pipeline, the pumping station, and downstream treatment works and connections into the network, providing water across to Southern Waters region. We need to lay a pipeline to fill the reservoir in the winter from Bedhampton Springs and to take water out to supply it to you when it's needed. The same pipeline could also be used to steadily draw off water into the Hermitage stream in the unlikely event we need to empty the reservoir. During the 2008 consultation, we heard support for a pipeline route that followed the Riders Lane and Hermitage Stream corridors. Since then, we've had a look in more detail at how we could lay the pipe along this route and the disruption it might cause. We've also considered new ways of laying pipe. We've looked at the engineering and how difficult it would be to build, disruption to the local community and traffic, the health, safety and well-being of the people building the pipeline and maintaining it in the future, environmental effects and sustainability, and the overall cost. As a result of this, we've slightly updated the pipeline route, which you can see in outline on this map. This route minimises the impact on communities, environmentally sensitive areas, and areas of open space with trees and grass. These would be restored after the pipe is in place. Most of the pipe will be installed using an open cut method, where we dig down from the road or land, lay the pipe, and then fill in the ground above it. In some places, we would tunnel underground using a pipe jacking method to push the pipe into place underground from one open cut hole, for example, under the railway line. Where we cross the Riders Lane and Hermitage streams, we can also take the opportunity to improve these watercourses. We plan the work so it can be carried out as quickly as possible and cause as little disruption to as few people as possible. Our proposals for the pipeline will be submitted as part of the wider planning application for the reservoir to Havant Borough Council and East Hampshire District Council later this year. The pipeline section will be an outline proposal and, if it's supported, we'll submit a detailed planning application with more information on construction and traffic management later on. For the detailed plans, we'll be looking at how we can limit the size of the areas we're working in to reduce disruption to footpaths, residents and local roads, stagger site activities to reduce traffic, restrict when work can be carried out, for example, not working overnight, and consider noise insulation measures. We'll speak to you again about these detailed plans to hear what you think.
So that's the update on the route of the pipeline to get water to and from the reservoir. Bill Irvine joins me, lead design engineer for the project, looking after the reservoir design, but also the pipeline as well. Bill, we've had a couple of questions in about the reservoir, which we'll get to when we do the wrap up of all the questions with the rest of the panel in due course. First of all, Hayley's been typing away furiously, and she's talked about the pipeline in the context of, has a capacity test been carried out on the Hermitage stream? It often floods during heavy rainfall. Will there be measures taken in order to ensure that emptying the reservoir in an emergency doesn't cause the stream to flood even further, which could affect people's homes? So I guess Hayley worried about the doomsday scenario of, we need to empty the reservoir in an emergency. There's a large amount of rain around at the same time. Can the stream take that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Hayley. So I think, yeah, it's well, first of all, yes, we have undertaken sort of flood studies on the capacity of the Hermitage stream and indeed Riders Lane stream as well, because there's actually 2 points of discharge or 2 points that we introduce the waters into out of the reservoir into the watercourses. So that's up at the reservoir itself into Riders Lane stream, and then also a proportion of those flows down into the Hermitage stream as well. So yeah, we've done a full flood study that's been reviewed by the Environment Agency as well. So they're obviously very interested in making sure that you know, they understand how these systems are going to perform and the sort of flood risk that's associated. So yeah, we understand how the Hermitage stream and Riders Lane streams behave at the moment, and the check that we're doing against that in terms of the drain down of flows from the reservoir, and not to increase any flood risk to properties or to residents along those routes. I think it's worthwhile saying that you know, the frequency or likelihood of actually having to drain down the reservoir is incredibly small. You know, the reservoir is designed to latest best practice, and it'll be inspected and maintained as well. We do need to check and test that drain down system's performance, but it won't be tested to the sort of full capacity. It'll be the valves and the control systems will be open to a relatively small proportion of the full capacity. So that will happen on a regular basis, once every 6 months, 12 months. But yeah, in terms of the full flow, that would only be used in the very rare event of an emergency.
Okay, and then just briefly a question from Vernon, this time about the embankment at the reservoir. Is that going to be constructed entirely from material that's on site already? So I guess, is there going to be a need to bring stuff on site via HGVs and what have you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Vernon. I think as Jim pointed out early in the session today, we are very fortunate that the site has a lot of clay material available to us. So the vast majority of the embankment will be constructed using that on-site material. We do need to sort of process that and work it so that it's the right sort of consistency for the embankment construction itself. But we will need to bring some materials in. So yeah, unfortunately, the clay material, while it's great for holding water, it's really great in terms of, sort of providing that waterproof seal. We do need to include some drainage so that the whole sort of embankment sort of works and we get rid of water where we need to. So out of that structure, so we do need to import some granular material to form some of those drainage elements within the structure. As well, there'll be the protection, sort of wave protection, so sort of stone mat that will be provided on the upstream, on the wet side of the reservoir, and we need to bring in those sort of rock materials as well.
Okay, thanks, Bill. If the rest of the panel want to switch their cameras and their microphones back on, we've got quite a few questions to rattle through before we finish up. So I'll just fire them at you and just try and be as succinct in your answers as you can, but giving a good answer at the same time. Jamie, one for you from Nathan. The paths nearest the reservoir, excluding the northern side, look close to the edge of the water. How close are they going to be?
So running around the whole of the reservoir, we're going to have a fence essentially, trying to prevent people from accessing the water. So they're going to be roughly 5 meters away, but this will vary depending on the levels of the water.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's go back to the environmental questions that were asked in the wake of that discussion with Trevor and Liz. And Trevor, perhaps one for you from Anne. So Anne says, first of all, let me say that I'm impressed at the efforts you are making to inform and consult and the level of thought that's going into the environmental impact. She's got some concerns though, one of which is encouraging people to use the area for leisure, which means you'll need to tidy the area and make it safe for people. This could mean removing or making safe old trees that provide an important habitat for many creatures, not least of all the rare Bechstein bats that you found there in significant numbers. Also, the effect on the connectivity of the landscape, especially as you're not the only development in the area. There's a lot of house building planned for the area. So I guess two aspects to that.
Yeah.
What about the wildlife that's on site and how that could be affected by the new setup on site? And how are we taking account of wider development that the reservoir is part of?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. Sort of as the person that found Bechstein's bats back in 2006, I have a particular interest in looking after them and protecting them. So I've been doing an awful lot in the local area, working with the county ecologist and also with Natural England. So I'm currently preparing, and I've already submitted the first draft to Natural England for a Bechstein's bat strategy, which will look to protect Bechsteins in the wider area and ensure that there is connectivity between the bats that we found and where we think they come from. So our radio tracking data suggests they come from the southeast, and we think they're linked to the Sussex populations. So that's what we're looking to do to maintain that. But obviously we've also done this advanced planting, which I know will take a few years to sort of come to fruition. But already we've had our radio tracking work has shown that Bechstein's bats are using the eastern side and going up into Havant Thicket to forage. So we've got that connectivity there. So as long as we can maintain that and broaden that, then that's important, and that's what we're doing. what was the second bit?
Just about how the reservoir is part of wider development and how that's being looked at overall.
Yeah, so as part of the environmental impact assessment, Liz's team will be looking at the cumulative effects of all development in the local area. And I think, as I've already mentioned, the Becksteins BAT strategy does take into account all of that. And we're trying to maintain foraging areas and sort of, because Becksteins, although a lot of the literature tells you they like sort of deciduous woodland, broadleaf woodland, we've actually found that their roost trees tend to be in like the parkland trees, so those sort of large standard oaks in fields and things like that. So we're looking at maintaining connectivity across sites where those sort of habitats are present.
Okay, and there's a follow-up question that's come in, sort of similar points from Liz and Anne about the ancient woodland. And Anne in particular says, I do feel you should make it clear that new woodland is very different from ancient woodland as a habitat.
Yeah.
Good you're planting more trees, but it will not be compensation in my lifetime, is what Anne says.
Yeah, we've made that very clear. We're being very open about the fact that, you know, the woodlands that are being lost are ancient woodlands. There have been some discussions around two of the pieces of woodland, for example, Middle Clearing and Round Wood. They don't conform to ancient woodland, and we did actually walk the Woodland Trust around the site, and they agreed with us. And we've actually had an independent assessment of that woodland as well. But, you know, it's designated as ancient woodland by Natural England, so we appreciate it is going to change. And, you know, woodland takes many hundreds of years to produce, and you know, unfortunately we're doing the best we can. Wildlife Trust are very happy with the proposals we're sort of currently talking through with them. So I think, you know, we're taking it very seriously.
Okay, and there's a question I think that's coming for Kieran about the visitor centre. What type of energy are you planning to use in your visitor centre? Will you be providing recharge facilities for electric vehicles? And are you planning for your visitor centre to be plastic free? So number of sustainability questions there on the visitor centre, Kieran.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, sustainability is so high on our agenda for the project overall. In terms of the sort of energy supply into the visitor centre itself, it's kind of early days, and we're still reviewing all those options. But looking at the most sort of sustainable approaches and passive approaches as well. So looking at fabric first.
Yeah, and I guess your point would be to people, go to the website and post your ideas. No matter how outlandish they may seem, it may be something that we can take on board, and you can put it into the more detailed design for the visitor centre. Yeah,
please do. Please share all your ideas, and I love the idea that it can be completely plastic free.
Grand. Further point for you, Kieran, from Michael, will there be webcams and the relevant virtual systems so people can watch what's going on the wetland area from the comfort of their homes? And I guess, you know, those webcams might be mounted on the visitor centre.
Yeah. Again, a fantastic suggestion there. And I think that's, you know, a very great idea, which we can try and incorporate into the wetlands so people can see it from the comfort of their own homes.
Okay, Simon, got a question for you from Emma Sargent. She says, I live in Warren Park, 2 minutes from the proposed site. How are you going to protect local residents from parking by visitors who won't want to pay for parking at either the reservoir site or perhaps Staunton Country Park? Simon, I think you're still on mute, by the way.
Thanks, Joel. That's my first schoolboy error of the lot. Thanks, Emma. That's a really good question, and something that we're taking some learning from Hampshire County Council on. They run these sorts of sites all over the place, and they come across these sorts of problems. So what we're doing is we're listening to their ideas about how you manage not just traffic onto the site, but in the surrounding roads, and how you create circumstances where people who may not be able to or may not wish to pay for you know, a long car park can actually still visit the site using their car quickly. What we'd really like is that the vast majority of visitors don't use their cars, and you know, hopefully in 10 years time, when the site's up and running, things will be quite different, and we'll have more people using buses, bicycles, and walking onto the site. But yes, we'll learn from Hampshire County Council and what their ideas are and how we solve that problem.
Okay, and Bob, perhaps a question for you. This person says, excuse me, it was a question basically about Southern Water and the agreements that are in place with them. And I guess what's the need for Southern Water to use the water that the reservoir will enable is, and whether that could change in the future. So it's concern about the agreement with Southern Water being a binding one that can't change over time necessarily because something changes at their end?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. So there are a couple of kind of agreements that are part of this picture. So Southern Water have entered into an agreement with DEFRA and the Environment Agency, which commits them to reducing their abstraction from the chalk streams. So yeah, there is a binding agreement in place on Southern there. And then in addition to that, we're in the process at the moment of finalising what's called a bulk supply agreement, which is really the supply of water from Portsmouth Water's area to Southern. And we are only part of the overall solution that Southern are putting in place. They have to find a lot more water than we are able to provide to substitute for the reduction of abstraction from chalk streams. But yes, these are all legally binding agreements, and one of them is in place already. The other one is close to being finalised.
Okay, that's great. I've got a fair few questions on the leisure side to get through, so let's talk to Jamie and perhaps Simon and Kieran as well. Jamie, one for you. How many benches for seating are going to be situated around the reservoir, and how far apart are they going to be? As it's likely that people will want to rest some of the way round, because it's a 5-kilometre circuit if you do the whole way round.
Hi, yes, thanks for the question. Absolutely, we're going to provide benches as you go around the site. There's going to be many spots that will be great for viewing, essentially. So we're going to provide seating in areas where we want to visualize these aspects, and yeah, there will be benches all around the site.
Okay, Simon, I know you've looked at this because it came in as a suggestion via I think an email or a letter that we had in. Will model boating be okay on the reservoir, says Mark?
Yeah, good question, Mark. They're all good questions today, aren't they? So yes, someone wrote to us actually asking us exactly that question, and we had a good old think about this one. So what we'd like to do is have a chat with folk who run model boating clubs, and find a way that they can operate safely with their own safety in mind, but also with the safety of other users. How they can guarantee they'll operate within a demarcated part of the reservoir and not go outside it, and demonstrate that they're able to do this in a responsible and safe way. And then we'd be really interested to consider how we can make that happen.
Okay, and again, perhaps one for you as well, Simon. It's about parking charges from Hayley. She says, what are they going to be, and would they go to the council? Would they go to Portsmouth Water? Who would receive the income?
Hi, Hayley. Yeah, so the scale won't be set just at this point, because we won't be charging for car parking for another 9 years or so yet. So it's still very early days. The money will be reinvested into the operation and the management of the site itself, which will be managed by 3 organisations: Portsmouth Water with the overall accountability, Hampshire County Council, who deliver the customer experience, and Forestry England, who'll do a lot of the sort of terrestrial woodland ecological management and some of the visitor experience as well. So all the money will be reinvested into that. The level of car parking charges will be set to be either identical to or very similar to what's charged at Staunton Country Park. And if the Forestry England team bring in car park charging, then it'll be identical to theirs as well. What we don't want to do is to create a competition between the 3 sites. We want them to operate as a partnership, so we're operating the same way.
Okay, and kind of touching on that point, who's going to look after the site in terms of litter picking, maintenance, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so back to the 3 organisations who've expressed an interest in running the site. It's a partnership between Portsmouth Water, who will run the sort of water and water environment aspects, Hampshire County Council, who will run the majority of the visitor experience, and that would include overall site maintenance and management, and then Forestry England, who will do most of the sort of work on the woodland and work on the terrestrial ecology. But there'll also be opportunities for folk to get involved. So we'd expect there to be upwards of 80 to 100 volunteers working on the site at some point, and that's getting involved in managing the wetland, managing the woodland, looking after the gardens, helping with making the site a really brilliant place for local people to come and enjoy themselves.
Okay, we've got a couple of comments on the access routes or the potential access routes, Andy, which I guess show that there's pros and cons to both. So there's someone who is supportive of the southern route only because they feel the B2149 is a very busy road, and also the northern route would involve trees or land needing to be affected to put that route in. Equally, Emma feels that the southern route goes straight through a residential area. It's not even a B road. There's a school on that road. It would be ridiculous to use that route. So I guess that just shows there are pluses and minuses to both the options that have been worked up so far.
Yes, I think from the comments made by the public, they are quite correct. There is a sort of heavy environmental premium, more so on the northern route than on the southern one, but the southern one has the proximity to the sort of residential areas which has been identified. That's one of the reasons why we've highlighted that we'll be looking at both to mitigate the levels of impact from both the construction traffic and the operational traffic. That's why we are seriously considering the operation of both routes.
Okay, and then Jennifer has added in, I live by the access point, and you said there was good visibility for access. I think she's talking about the southern route that comes out on Swanmore Road. I drive out of Penley Court Junction, and there's not always a clear view. You said if you move it down, there's a school junction. It would not have to be moved that far, says Jenny. So she feels there's scope for that point that comes out onto Swanmore Road.
Yes, that's a sort of fair point. What I was trying to make, perhaps not clearly, was that effectively we would be looking for the space for the road to run between the toe of the embankment and the boundary of the site, and it would be a question of space behind that. So if we pulled it all the way down, there is the sort of issue with the school, and we wouldn't get too close to the school. But yes, you could move it down a little bit, but if you did, then you'd have the proximity of the toe of the embankment on that side, which would restrict space for the access road at that location.
Okay, a couple of quick questions back to Jamie around access for pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders as well. Linda and Peter have asked, in terms of out of hours access for pedestrians, will this be accessible to all-terrain mobility scooters? So is that in the scope?
Yes, so we're looking to include access for all users essentially. So we'll be looking at kissing gates and other kind of access points which can include for all these different types of users, different gate options as well for horses that can get in and prevent essentially motorized vehicles.
Okay, and on that note, Hayley's come up with a point. There's an issue with motor vehicles which aren't supposed to be on the bridleway but are often there. The police are aware, but are there plans to put in bollards or such like that will stop such vehicles from accessing the site? I guess that's pretty tricky if it's a motorbike, for example, because what's the difference between that and a horse in terms of size and access?
It is a tricky one to tackle, absolutely. But there are some gates that are horse friendly and prevent those with motorbikes getting in, although there's always a means for people to get around these, but that's essentially what we'll be doing.
Yeah, I know you've had a lot of discussions with the horse riding community locally as well, because there's been a follow-up point about whether bridleway access is still needed on the reservoir site once the reservoir is completed, because this person says they've not really seen much horse riding there, but certainly the people you've spoken to are very keen that bridleway access is still very much maintained as part of the site, and legally it needs to be so.
That's it. Yes, so there's a bridleway that runs from west to east, bridleway 120, and this is being removed. So we're looking to reprovide this along the southern embankment, and then there will also be a temporary diversion that runs through Forestry England land to the north, and hopefully connect these two up by the end.
Okay, Bob, a couple more for you. One that's sort of slightly off on a tangent. We've had a suggestion that the visitor centre and its roof look ideal for solar panels, but I know there's been one suggestion from a local councillor about floating solar panels on the reservoir in due course. Is that something that's an option in the future?
Yeah, that's certainly something that we are looking at. We have a wider programme as Portsmouth Water and as the industry, actually the water sector, to become carbon neutral by 2030. So we are actively looking for renewable power opportunities on this and many other sites that we have dotted around. I think floating PV has become much more technologically kind of achievable in the last few years, and there are even new developments with the solar panels, that they can actually absorb power from both sides rather than just one side. And water is quite useful in that sense with its kind of reflective qualities. So it's certainly something that we are looking at in terms of floating PV. It does actually have a sort of side benefit on the quality of the water. One of the problems we have with large open bodies of water is around algal blooming and algal growth. And floating panels actually help prevent that because they block out the sunlight.
Okay, we got a question in from William. This one's for Kieran. A lot of users are currently and will increasingly in the future be dog walkers. Will the visitor centre and the cafe be dog friendly? So quite a specific question this far ahead of the visitor centre being constructed. But I guess that's what we want, lots of ideas so we get that in the design details.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's and as I sort of said in the video, we have tried to consider all the users that we know use the site already, and dog walkers are in that contingent as well. So yeah, we're looking at areas where there could be a dog dip in the landscape, separate from the reservoir and the wetland, and also looking at how we can provide access to the visitor centre with a sort of hatch. So dog walkers or dog owners can go round to a hatch and get a cup of tea as well.
Okay, last few questions that we'll get through before we wrap up. And Bob, sorry, there's a question that I meant to put to you before from Liz. And she says, who owns Portsmouth Water? I know that Southern Water is owned by shareholders and has obviously had recently a hefty fine for misinformation around water quality. What about Portsmouth Water in terms of ownership structure?
Yeah, so Portsmouth Water, I mean, all of the companies, the water companies in England are in private hands, so they all have shareholders, and they all tend to be institutions that are investing on behalf of pension funds, because water investment is a relatively low risk but hopefully dependable way to invest money. So in our case, we have a company called Ankala, which is a sort of a medium-sized infrastructure fund. So they basically take pension fund money from some of the well-known large companies in the UK, John Lewis, Jaguar Land Rover, those sort of companies, and they invest in infrastructure assets, not just in the water sector. The water is one area, but also in renewables and in other infrastructure areas as well. They own, for example, a share in the John Lennon Airport in Liverpool, and also, I think, a thermal energy business in Iceland. So all sorts of infrastructure. We are not in the wastewater business, as you probably know. We are a water-only company, and I think the unfortunate headlines that people have seen regarding Southern are around some problems that they had historically in their wastewater business. We are probably one of the leading companies in the sector. That's not just us saying that, that's from our regulator. Last year, Ofwat put us in the top 3 companies, and that's based on the highest standards of service. We lead the industry in terms of the customer service that we deliver, and we deliver that level of service for by far the lowest price. We are way below our nearest competitor in terms of price. So we believe we deliver a very strong package of value and service for our customers. But as I've said earlier on the introductory sort of Q's and A's, we're very much a community-based business, a local business. We're one of only 2 city-centric water-only companies left in England today. Bristol is the other one, and with our scale and with our closeness to community, those desires or those bonds to deliver on behalf of our communities are very, very strong. And there can be no greater example of that than this reservoir project. We are absolutely keen, absolutely chomping at the bit to get this reservoir built for the benefit of our local communities and our local customers, as well as helping with the wider kind of issues with water resources in the southeast and the environment.
Okay, great. We'll come back to Bob for some closing remarks. Last couple of questions, first of all. Andy, one for you from Linda and Peter again. The proposed northern route follows the edge of the woodland, I believe. Would it not be possible to purchase the land required and run the access route in the adjoining fields, I guess, to reduce the impact on ancient woodland potentially, Andy? Is that something that's been considered?
Yes, it was one of the options we considered in the option evaluation assessment process we undertook. As you are local, you're probably aware, as you approach the field, the alignment of the B2149 goes up onto a bit of a plateau and then flattens out. If we move the road from its current location either to the east or to the west, then the visibility from that junction will be seriously impaired, and it is much less safe from a user's perspective if we did that. That's why the place where it is unfortunately the optimum space for good visibility.
Okay, thanks to Andy for that. And last couple of questions for you, Jamie, from Sally. First of all, she says, what about carriages, as in horse-drawn carriages? Is that something that is going to be accessible for people?
Hi, Sally. Thanks for your interest. Great questions. So horse boxes and stuff like that will still be allowed into the Forestry England's car park, which is on just off the B2149.
Okay, and I think she may be talking about almost like trotting carriages. Is that something that would be allowed on bridleways potentially?
It's something that we'll need to consider closer to the date. Yes.
So I would recommend, Sally, go to the website, fill out our feedback survey to give your views, and you can also leave that as an idea on our suggestions board as well. And final one, again, from Sally, Jamie, for you. Will there be a round trip route for horse riders? Use is low now because of antisocial quad bikers making it too dangerous. We need safe off-road routes, not less, or more off-road routes that are safe, not less, she says.
Yes, we are still in contact with Forestry England, and this is essentially what we're trying to deliver is a circular route around the reservoir, which will give equestrians and all the different types of users this kind of different landscape that they can just travel through.
Okay, many thanks to the panelists for all their input. Many thanks to you out there for your questions and for sticking with us throughout the webinar. Hope you found it interesting. On that note, let's launch another poll for you to fill in. Did you find this webinar useful? Again, multiple choice answers to choose from, and also that question about your support for our plans to develop Havant Thicket. Largely, people were very supportive overall, with a few people having their doubts. The answers we have in so far, broadly similar on the support front, and 100% of people so far finding the webinar very useful indeed, which is good to hear. The support, that's broadly the same as it was before, so about 80–90% are supportive, around 10% are not. But again, we'd encourage you, no matter what your point of view, to fill out our feedback form either on the website, that's portsmouthwater.co.uk/Havant-Thicket-Reservoir, or we can send you a hard copy in the post if you write to us or phone us on 02392 449084. So let's end the polling there and share the results, and you should be able to see that on your screen. So did you find the webinar useful? Everyone who joined today found it useful, which is really good news for us. This is a bit of a learning exercise for us. With the impact of coronavirus, we had to change our plans and we switched from face-to-face contact to webinars, but the webinars are proving very popular, so that's good to hear from you and you found it useful. And do you support our plans? It's around 90% do support the plans, around 10% don't. But we want to hear all points of view as part of this consultation. Everything you tell us will go into that planning application that will go into Havant Borough Council and East Hampshire District Council in due course. You can get in touch with us via the methods you see on the screen in front of you, the website. A lot of debate going on Facebook. At Havant Reservoir is our name on the Facebook side of things. A lot of debate there about the leisure side of things in particular. You can also email us with your feedback. You can write to us as well, and you can call us on that number to tell us what you think or to request a printed copy of our consultation booklet and our feedback form as well. Bob, before we leave, did you want to say any closing remarks? You started things off with a clear message to people to have their say around the consultation. What have you got to say to close out the webinar?
Well, firstly, thanks to everybody for taking part, and the quality of the questions that you put forward and the continuous flow of questions has been fantastic. So thank you for engaging. I'll just repeat my messages at the beginning. Please tell your family, your friends, anybody you like really, that this consultation is underway and we'd like to hear everyone's views. But thank you for your support. and for engaging in this exercise today. I'm really pleased that you found it useful. So getting that feedback is really helpful for us for future events like this. So thanks very much to everybody.
Okay, and just a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be available on our website very shortly. So if you just Google Havant Thicket Reservoir, it will take you straight through to that consultation website where the webinar recording will be available. And there are other webinars taking place. The next one is Friday morning at 10 o'clock. That's Friday the 22nd of May. We've then got a bit of a break, and then we've got 2 more on the 3rd and 4th of June. And the 4th of June, which is a Thursday, is 6 till 8 in the evening to fit in with people who may be out working or such like, so that they can join in as well. So do go to our website, portsmouthwater.co.uk/Havant-Thicket-Reservoir. Have your say, sign up for a webinar and give us your views, and do tell your colleagues, your friends and your family to do the same. Before we go, we do want to leave you with that eye-catching film that we've got of how the reservoir would look once completed. In the meantime, I wish you the best for the rest of this Tuesday, sunny Tuesday in this part of the world, and thank you for your time once again.
Thank you very much.